Throughout history, great leaders, artists, and famous outlaws have shared deep secrets, led massive armies side by side, and literally sworn they would die for one another. But as we're going to see today, in the corridors of power, a best friend is so often just an enemy who hasn't stabbed you yet. From the grand, glittering palaces of the Renaissance to the dusty plains of the American Wild West, today, in this explainer, we are breaking down 5 legendary historical friendships that ended in the absolute ultimate devastating betrayal.
So, it begs the question, when exactly does loyalty turn to lethal jealousy? I mean, history is completely packed with epic rivalries, sure, but let's be honest, nothing stings quite like a backstab from someone you love and trust implicitly. By the end of our explainer today, you'll clearly see why some of history's greatest figures really should have kept their friends close, but their best friends even closer. Let's dive right in.
Number 1. The Revolutionary Brothers, Maximilien Robespierre and George Danton.
During the French Revolution, these two guys were the twin engines of change. They were this totally unstoppable force when they were united, but their clashing personalities eventually tore them apart. On one hand, you had Danton. He was this charismatic voice of the people, and ultimately, he just wanted to slow down the executions and bring some peace to a bleeding nation. But then, on the flip side, you had Robespierre. They called him the Incorruptible. Well, he saw things a bit differently. Consumed by deep paranoia, Robespierre viewed Danton's desire for peace not as a voice of reason, but as outright treason against the revolution itself.
So, in 1794, Robespierre did the unthinkable. He actually had his own best friend arrested for conspiracy. The very man he built a republic alongside was sent to die. And get this, as Danton was being led out to the guillotine, he shouted this incredibly chilling final prediction to the crowd. He said, "He will follow me." And you know what? He was absolutely right. Robespierre's cold-blooded betrayal was the beginning of his own downfall, and he followed Danton to that exact same bloody fate just a few months later.
Number 2 on our list, the outlaw and the coward, Jesse James and Robert Ford.
Okay, so Jesse James was a living legend, right? And Robert Ford was, quite simply, his biggest fan. In fact, Jesse trusted Ford so deeply that he invited him to live in his own family home. But Ford wasn't looking for a best buddy. He was looking for a massive payout, $10,000. That was the exact price of his loyalty. An absolute secret, Ford made this sneaky backroom deal with the governor of Missouri to assassinate his idol just to get his hands on that staggering reward money.
So picture this. It's April 3rd, 1882. A completely mundane moment of domestic life suddenly turns fatal. Jesse was totally unarmed, just casually standing on a chair, dusting a picture frame on his wall, and Ford took that exact vulnerable moment to shoot him right in the back of the head. It was just so sudden and brutal. And sure, Ford did get his money, but he spent the rest of his life utterly despised. The public he thought would treat him like a hero forever branded him a dirty little coward for how he took down the famous outlaw.
Coming in at number 3, the artistic rivalry, Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin.
Now, not every historical betrayal ends in a literal assassination, right? Sometimes it just ends in pure madness. Back in 1888, Vincent van Gogh invited his good friend Paul Gauguin to start this grand artists' colony under one roof in Arles, France. But man, for 9 weeks, their shared studio rapidly devolved into this intense pressure cooker. You had Gauguin, who was pretty arrogant and aloof, clashing directly with Van Gogh, who was just desperate for affection and tragically mentally unstable. It was literally the perfect recipe for these incredibly violent arguments driven by out-of-control egos.
And it all boiled over. After one of their truly terrible fights, Gauguin just packed his bags and walked out of that yellow house forever. This betrayal of their shared dream was simply way too much for Vincent's fragile mind to process. That very night, a totally devastated Van Gogh famously took a straight razor and cut off his own ear. It's wild to think about, but the two men never laid eyes on each other again. So yeah, they left the world some of its greatest artistic masterpieces for sure, but it came at the cost of a completely shattered brotherhood.
Moving to number 4, the Emperor and the General, Napoleon Bonaparte and Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte.
Now, Bernadotte wasn't just some casual fair-weather ally. He was one of Napoleon's most trusted marshals. I mean, Napoleon even made him a prince. That is how incredibly close these two guys were. But as we're learning, loyalty can vanish in an absolute instant when the ultimate prize is dangled right in front of you. And for Bernadotte, that prize was the throne of Sweden.
The very second he was offered a foreign throne, his lifelong loyalty to France and to Napoleon completely evaporated. He took the crown and actually joined the War of the Sixth Coalition. This meant the very friend Napoleon had promoted and trusted was now actively turning armies against him.
A traitor to his blood. That is exactly what Napoleon called him, and honestly, you can totally see why. The betrayal wasn't just political, it was deeply tactical. Bernadotte used his intimate, insider knowledge of Napoleon's own military strategies to help the Allies defeat the Emperor at the massive Battle of Leipzig. And in the end, the contrast in how their lives wrapped up is just staggering. Bernadotte, the betrayer, died a wealthy, reigning king. Meanwhile, Napoleon, the betrayed, died totally isolated in exile.
And finally, number 5. Conquerors of the New World, Francisco Pizarro and Diego de Almagro.
So these two were once an unbreakable duo. They shared every grueling hardship, every golden treasure, working side by side to bring down the mighty Incan Empire. But, as the old saying goes, 2 men can share a bed, but they cannot share a throne. When the dust finally settled, and it was time to divide up this massive, newly conquered empire, Pizarro boldly just took the lion's share of the very best land for himself. He left his supposed brother-in-arms, Almagro, stuck with the much less fertile territory down to the south.
As you can guess, this deeply unequal division of land instantly triggered a full-blown bloody civil war between the former partners. It was a mess. Almagro was captured and eventually executed by Pizarro's own brother. But the cycle of vengeance absolutely did not stop there. Years later, Almagro's son, seeking revenge for his dad, burst right into Pizarro's palace during dinner and assassinated him. It's crazy. The very men who conquered an entire empire together ended up utterly destroying each other, just to get a slightly bigger piece of it.
Which brings us to our final verdict. History's worst best friend.
We've just navigated our way through 5 extraordinary friendships that devolved into 5 truly catastrophic betrayals. Because of toxic ambition, greed for cash, and just unhinged jealousy, 10 lives were completely ruined by the very people they trusted the most. The historical sources lay it out perfectly for us. A smile is so often just a mask for a secret. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Out of everyone we covered, which of these best friends do you think was the absolute worst? When you have to weigh the pathetic, sneaky cowardice of Robert Ford shooting an armed man in the back for some cash, against the cold-blooded, ideological betrayal of Robespierre sending his own co-founder to the guillotine, well, it really forces you to question the true nature of loyalty, doesn't it? What really holds our alliances together when the stakes are at their absolute highest? Keep that in mind the next time you think you know exactly who has your back. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, keep questioning everything you learn.